You know, it's very arrogant and stupid for a person to sit in front of a recording piece of equipment like a camera and record themselves unless they really intend other people to be enjoying what they're saying. The only suggestion I can make is if you don't like anything I'm saying, simply turn me off and forget about it. What I'm trying to talk about is not politics, really. It's philosophy. It's not even philosophy in a certain sense. It approaches metaphysics. And I've talked about it lots of times in different ways. And the simple trinity for me is Mother Earth, Father Sun, everything in between, surface chemistry, or molecules in that surface chemistry with photons of conscious awareness that seems to be triggered by light coming into our eyes in the mornings. A general fear of darkness that seems to accompany us, some of us anyway. Maybe just some of those who survived wars, as I have. I think that we have to acknowledge that the principles of understanding are expanding today enormously, not only in the precision of the technologies that can arise from the various pure science which has gone on, but the broader sense of the nature of the spirit which has engaged our lives. As much as it engages us in some very deep and profound way that becomes more evident to us as we walk down that path of understanding, but it gives us a whole sense of values, it seems. Now, obviously, it's been pointed out time and time again that, if I was born to a head-hunting society, then headhunting would be my game. Right? Well, game was not so much a part of my culture as a child. My culture was more a service culture. And in my father's case, which of course got me into the whole, what should we say, intelligence game, was a driver for an Admiral Strutt, Vice Admiral Strutt, who was, I believe, the son or nephew of an earlier Strutt who had been in charge of the British Navy, or a big part of it anyway. Being an admiral, I guess, you get more than a boat, in the First World War. So he came from a long line of, shall we say, upper-class, aristocratic sea dogs, probably pirates. But I believe that along with a lot of seagoing men, they develop a sort of an international view. Whether it's because they have lovers in a lot of ports and therefore they can see the beauty in the people where they've been, or quite what it is. Certainly we know, most coastal traffic started out with adventurers and went then to trading, and then of course went to piracy, and then of course went to... So in other words, naval history is quite instructional. It's always been significantly different from land history because the characters are quite different. To build a boat, and up on the wall behind me here, I got a picture of my boat right there that I built some years ago. You have to sort of have a grasp of a number of specificities, I think they like to call them, areas of understanding. You have to know a bit about ropes, you have to know a bit about chemistry, you have to know a bit about nails, you have to know something about bolts. You have to sort of pick up on a few, and they have to be really very practical, and especially if you're doing your own design, because hey, the sea is not a mistress to be messed with. The sea is the womb of the mother in a sense, because I think all life probably emerged from the sea. Certainly mammalian life and reptilian life existed side by side with, largely, I believe, sharks are still scared of mammals, the small whales and of course the dolphins. So, there is a mammalian line here that we're all a part of, and we should be taking care of that mammalian line. Now, when we look at our history has always been one of, not always, but significantly long periods of deceit, dirty tricks, blue meanness, rip-offs, untruths, violence, all the way down to genocide. And people say, well, it was always been that way, and therefore it's always going to be that way. Well, no, I don't believe that for one moment. Absolutely not. You know, I am definitely a product of an age that was at the end of the age of iron and steel, Kali Yuga. My dad was as intimately connected with the military and the attitudes that existed then, at least some of the military officers who had seen, you know, British colonialism at work, and knew that the technique used by the British in their colonialism was, first of all, you'd run your cannons and blow the bejesus out of some poor native village, and then you go in and you're real kind to them, you know. Well, they didn't feel good about that, and certainly the sailors were against it, and that's why they had serious problems impressing men because that's not the way good people think, and the commons of Britain and the commons of Canada, the commons around the world are good people. They're God's people. You know, we have so many things in common. We have mothers and fathers. We have children and grandchildren. We have friends, we have neighbors, we have associates, you know, and they're all part of the same creation. We're all in the same soup, rich and poor. You know, although I was brought up around great wealth. You know, my dad drove mostly Bentleys and Rolls, not his own, I might say, but for the Admiral and the Baroness, who was the Admiral's wife. And when the war came along, and the Admiral, you know, got a military driver, because he was, I guess, still in the, well, he was. I mean, what he turned out to be, I found out not so many years ago, was Admiral the White. Now, I didn't know what the hell that meant until somebody found out that it meant that he was the commanding officer of Plymouth. Well, Plymouth was the head of, you know, North Atlantic intelligence for, well, the North Atlantic in the Second World War. So obviously this guy was about on a level with Canaris, who was the Nazi intelligence guy. And I have a suspicion he must have been the guy, or maybe not, I don't know. But I've always seen him as that role that Kenneth More had in Sink the Bismarck. He would be about that age. You know, he was only a little bit older than my dad. So he's still a pretty young man at the time of the Second World War, well, in his prime, I guess. My dad started working with him, I think, in 28. And I was born in 36. And I guess I was conceived in Ireland. So I have a great deal of affection for the Green Isle, especially when I heard from the High Priest of Pot, as he called himself, probably still does, that Ireland was, you know, a hemp-based economy. That's why the linen was so good from Ireland, and that was a big part of the, you know, the indigenous Irish culture, which you know, enabled them to live comfortably on the land until, of course, the gory British came in, and time of Cromwell and so on, and did murderous things that even the Romans weren't capable of doing. However, that's another history, all of which I guess I drag around in my mind as being something that needs to see correction. Essentially, the only way to do that, I think, is to accept metaphysically the practical reality of the eternality of the soul. Now, I guess everybody goes, well, you know, all Christians believe that. Yeah, but do they live as though they do? Do they live in a fearless way? Have they transcended the necessity for monetarism in their lives? Probably not, you know, and who can blame them? I don't blame anybody. I'm a no-blame man. Hey, I don't blame anybody for what's gone down. I mean, you know, it's a product of the very thing that I was concerned that the British wouldn't do after the Second World War, which got me basically run out of there. And that was simply that, along with my dad and the Admiral and a few other kind, thinking, thoughtful people, and they were associated with the Theosophical people as well. So the Theosophical people, were people who were trying to transcend the evils of religion, the evils of sectarian religion. Freedom is denied by the acceptance of the myth of money. It's as simple as that. It's just as simple as that. When Jesus Christ turned over the money changers in the temple, you may be sure that that was why they crucified that man. You may be sure, because he challenged the authority of the priestcraft to determine monetary engagements, let's call it that. They could say who was and who was not going to get whatever bounty there was from transferring from your drachmas to your shekels or whatever. Manipulation around numbers, manipulation around banking, really, And banking actually has not been with us that long. My persuasion is that the paucity, the lack of serious caches of money, maybe outside of China, where, they seem to be a dime a dozen, the bronze coins of ancient China are, I don't know if they're still around, but they're very common. And, I'm not just sure about that whole thing. In any event, monetary indoctrination starts at a very early age. Your cousins, the rich cousins, will give you, a couple of bob, and you think, oh, that's what I want. I want to have, because you go and buy your candy and you get high from your candy. I'm talking now as a 5-6-year-old child, and but my parents were a lot wiser in some ways, and a lot less informed in other ways, because in those days my dad was working, when the war came, he started working with air service training. And air service training were a branch of intelligence that he got sent to by the admiral, who was, of course, running the show, because the Navy always did have a big part of the Royal Air Force. In fact, it was the Royal Naval Air Service before it became the Royal Flying Corps, and there's all kinds of little things going on there. So the Navy really did want to get back to sailing boats and going for nice rides with lots of matelots and not having to burn anybody down too much. That can't really be said for some of the early aviators who said, no, we don't have to use the Navy, we can bomb them into submission. Of course, the division of Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, all the chaos, really came about as a result of these lunatics who, had in many cases only just entered the ranks of the First World War, and then of course wanted to go on flying because what a whizzo thing it was to do, and what a great adventure. We can go and machine gun down a few wogs or whatever. Oh my godfathers, we can be crusaders in the name of Christ, and let's pray to the bomb before we drop it on these infidels or whatever they are. Anyway, that kind of thing, has proved to be very disastrous. And I regret to say that, my interest in aircraft came from about that time. And of course, I was totally unaware of the negative impact. Now, how do we look at the future? Or how do I look at the future? But I think collectively there is a commonly held ideal, and the commonly held idea, commonly held by the common people, that we can come to peace. There's also a common concept that no, we will go down to disaster. Well, people tell me that even in ancient Egypt, there were dire threats of disaster, and today, of course, it's a big part of our entertainment. All these prophecies by these loonies who, probably were on bad rye, on LSD, because there's lots of evidence you know, a lot of stuff was under the influence of everything, and you know, it gets written down because a guy can write, or he can afford to have a scribe, or he talks to, so he's a dictator, he can talk to somebody and they write it down, or he can put it on YouTube or something, you know, which is exactly what I'm doing. But I only preach a perfect peace coming out of this. I only preach a joyous inheritance of the planet. I only preach that the planet Neptune sends its goodwill to the planet Earth, and would like planet Earth to recognize that we on Neptune are a thought force form field living in a parallel universe, and because we are of such an order, we can invade the minds of people on the planet for goodness and for joy and for harmony. And you know, we've been here a long time, and we've always been here because planet Earth is actually the garden of all bipod humanoid thought force form field species. Now, that's a bit tough to grasp, that everything that is of our order, that is, has, you know, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, 1 anal orifice, ears, you know, and 2 legs. Not always 2 legs, but certainly the structure. And we will always be the genetic pool for that style of experience, human experience. And when things get out of hand, and should we say, more people are choosing the easy way out, which is no easy way at all, but you know, it's sort of, in their mind, you know, creates the exodus, you know, like suicide and desire for early death, and all the dark stuff that ages people, all the dark stuff that, you know, makes people at 50, you know, look like they're 108, you know, and of course a lot of that is the abuse that these people have felt. So I'm not a blame person. You know, people often overspeak the role that upbringing plays, but no, I believe that what they say, it's a third nature, and it's a third nurture, you know, and if life is nurtured, then life grows in a positive direction. If, you know, if you feed, you know, live shit to plants, they're probably not going to do as well if you compost it first, because there is an element of time that's required to affect the expansion of consciousness to be acceptable on a galactic scale of tolerance. Now that sounds a bit off the wall, but I guess it even sounds a bit threatening, and there's nothing about the planet Neptune or the people of Neptune or my role as a communicator of that planet that implies threat. Not at all. You know, those are concepts which are generated by negative projection on the future, which of course is fear. You know, if you say, oh, you know, it's going to get worse, well, chances are you've opened the probability, because our attitude, an attitude of gratitude, to be grateful for what we've got, you know, is the profound and preferred quality of mind that we're looking for. And then, of course, there's, you know, there's the challenge of the human experience, you know, the challenge of life eternal, you know, because, you know, the structures which have arranged themselves around supporting the myth of money, you know, are clearly dangerous. Not only did they wipe out Jesus Christ, you know, they also wiped out Lincoln, because apparently Lincoln said, yeah, we can have a universal family credit. Yeah, We are the government of the United States. We are fighting to be the Union, and darn it, we will, control our destiny, and we will control the flow of money, and we will do that with the will of the people behind us. Well, what could be simpler? But no, even Obama, what a disaster that man has proved to be. And people said, oh, well, he can't say what he wants to say because, his family live in a world, already packed with dynamite, and so we can have a false flag thing. It's all bullshit. If the man had, when he had taken office, called his commanders around him and say, am I the commander-in-chief? And they'd say, yes, sir, or no, sir. And then he should say to them, will you or will you not obey my orders? Yes, sir, or no, sir? Yes, sir. Good. And will you assist me to uphold the Constitution of the United States? Yes, sir. And will you arrest any person that I feel obliged to call upon you to arrest on the grounds that they're war criminals and have deserted the principles of the United States? Yes, sir. Fine. Then arrest Bush, Cheney, and the rest of those gangsters that took over your government. And then come back to me and we'll say how we're going to get the United States, back as a moral and ethical people. Because either President Obama is the President of the United States with the authority of the Senate and the people, more importantly, the people of the United States. And that can be done through a simple poll. And that should happen through a simple poll. And I believe that if that isn't done, no, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not threatening. I can't say, well, if you don't do this, God will smite you most mightily on both cheeks and you will be on your arse. No, I don't believe that. I mean, my God is a loving God. My God loves creation. My God shines the sun of creation on creation every day and gives us energy to live and loves the mother and makes beautiful plants to grow on the mother and helps us all as caretakers of the planet, to get beyond the necessity for evil men to triumph. This has to be the last. This cannot, but be overwhelmed but by power to the peaceful. And my name's John, and John means gracious gift of God. And when I found that out, I tried to live that. I tried to be a good man. I tried not to borrow or steal or lie or cheat or do anything that was what I saw wrong. And, I think that's a simple path that if we took it, then good will inevitably result. How to do that in a world where cradle-to-grave consumption, consumerism, is the foundation of our times, and why, that can be explained reasonably enough, but I chose the path of minimalism. I said, really, I can accept very little and be very grateful. I don't need even a movement, That's a funny expression too. But that's just the way. I believe that the common people will raise their voices. I think that people will call for a caretaker government. I think the psychopaths who have taken over the power in Canada, and they are sadly confused people, will eventually quietly step down and say, yeah, we can have a direct democracy in Canada. We can have a direct caretaker government. And I'm saying that not as a politician. I have no aspirations to run for office or have office or anything like that. I'm just interested in common sense prevailing. That's all the Admiral and my dad expected of me, that I would speak for common sense. that I would say, hey, better to have hundreds of cadets sailing around in little sailboats off the coast here and all around the world than to have one big battleship vulnerable to an attack, or one big aircraft carrier vulnerable to death and dying. No, we don't need that kind of sailing. Wooden ships on the water, very free. I remember that came from the 60s. One of the groups then had that in there, and it struck me, and that's why I built a couple of boats, and that's why I decided to find my freedom by staying away from what I called the white man. And yeah, I lived on, I don't know what, fresh air. No, I had a couple of little spells when money came my way, and I managed to make it last a long time. And then I bumped into the Blessed Sacred Herb, and I'd already lived a good life here in Canada by the time I turned on. I was, well, in one place I say 33, which would have made it about 69, and I thought it was a bit later. I thought it was more like, oh, maybe about that, 68, 69. Anyway, I got on board the Magic Bus, Ken Kesey and all those guys, a little late, and and I once had this dream that after having jumped on the bus and there's this wild party going on, and I get to the front of the bus and I realize there's nobody driving the bus, and I thought, my godfathers, you know, all these people, and they don't really know where they're going. And so you know, I had this, I got a bit full of myself around that, and I started trying to organize the caretaker movement, and I showed up at Stanley Park a couple of times as the caretaker movement, and then I met John Henry Payne, who was a shaman from the North Shore who'd lived with the Aboriginal people over there with John Henry, no, he was John Henry, with Chief Dan George and that group, and you know, everybody thought he was a scoundrel because, you know, he'd wear his beads and his headband, and he always wore this grey suit. He'd been a logger, and but he was a friend of the Aboriginal people, and he and I became quite close friends. And oddly enough, he was the guy that put up his land for Greenpeace, and people forgot that, you know, that he was the guy that actually put the first money up. And I was with him around that time, although I was not directly involved with setting up Greenpeace. I wasn't involved with setting up very much, really. I was around for a lot of it and encouraged it and so on, but I always took the position that, being an Englishman and, you know, here to observe and perhaps comment on Canadian behavior, you know, I really didn't have the authority to go pushing in too much. However, my own views on, you know, what could you say, the misbehavior, the continued misbehavior of the United States, because they were certainly misbehaving as a people by the time long before I left England. I mean, right after the Second World War. And, you know, and then, of course, the first terrorism was the Zionists blowing up of the King George Hotel in Jerusalem. And, of course, that started the whole, you know, return to the homeland, which has led to, the United States using Israel as sort of a forward fire base. You know, it's like, well, we don't want it to all happen here, so, you know, we'll follow the Bible and we'll, you know, let them blow the shit out of poor old Israel again, you know. It's just, you know, because that's been shown in the Bible to happen a few times, you know, and maybe that's why they got so much desert there. Certainly people like Velikovsky have other ideas, but, you know, there's history, there's current history, there's speculation. All these things are more metaphysical. It's only when you look at the myths and legends of these various streams of pundits, these streams of interpreters of ancient scripts, the shaky nature of that, and the question, you know, how was it that such evolved communities were capable of doing that? And of course, there's always some bright spark around it and say, oh yeah, well, we can do it this way, you know, with common means understood by mechanics, and there's even pictures of it. But I don't know, I'm left with the feeling that Earth was, what can we say? What is it? Invaded? Not invaded. I think it was like a petri dish where certain styles of bipod humanoid thought force form field had their sway, and then were decimated, brought down in much the same way as the dinosaurs were brought down. You know, I mean, what brought down Greece? You know, we can say, well, it was because as soon as they went, you know, from a free man state to an empire, when the city was unable to be happy with, you know, the fields around, and felt that it needed to engage in foreign trade to feed the influx of what? Well, one might say, you know, the Neanderthals, perhaps the Cro-Magnon, however they were. You know, I mean, I see that there were these different types of humanity, all kind of existing around in there, all developing and sharing, you know, their cultural information, and some of them were pretty violent people, no question about it. So, you know, maybe, you know, the first empire was always defensive because, you know, the enemy are at the door, and so we gotta be prepared for that fear thing. Well, you know, we're still doing that kind of nonsense, and I think what is behind it is not so much the general will of the people, but these old institutions, these old technologies, which have absorbed huge masses of humanity, simply going towards destruction, and the whole thing having been a byproduct of the use of money. You know, it's almost as simple as that. There were really some tribes or families or regiments in some cases, because regiments were in fact a kind of family. You know, they would have their women and they would have their children, and the regiment would travel with the wives, especially, you know, overseas regiments when they went out to make colonies and so on. And then of course there'd be a certain amount of interbreeding with the local inhabitants and so on and so on. And this mixing of different cultures can happen in a peaceful way, it can happen in a violent way. It you know, happens through rape and plunder, or it can happen through exchange and barter and cooperation and all the good things. But generally speaking, the bad things have preceded the good things. Now, that is, of course, because there is a significant and violent greed built into people, and if one analyzes that greed, one finds actually it's fear. It's that there is not enough to go around, therefore we have to, and I say we, because this is not just, this starts with the individual, but it spreads to a larger conglomeration of individuals, almost like the fish know when the big shark is coming, and so they're able to separate, and in this way avoid, you know, being totally, you know, taken in by the ton. Apparently whales they get away with that. With krill, well, I guess that doesn't move as fast as little fish. In any event, most people have difficulty imagining a future. Most people don't have a vision of how we could live as people that is not adversarial. And again, this is a relatively new idea, along with banking and a few of those other things. And it has a lot to do with it has a lot to do with negative projection on the future, that most people at one time or another get encouraged to certain principles of behavior. The Christian ethic, take no heed for the morrow, of course, you know, they know you can't do that, you know. But if you look at it from, say, the position of a man like Ram Dass, he said, you know, in a sense, that's very profound, because what it's really saying to us is, be here now. You know, don't give energy till tomorrow until tomorrow is with us. And of course, tomorrow is always today, and so we're always advancing into tomorrow in a progressive way. And so by catching up with what we're doing in the moment, then tomorrow inevitably looks after itself, which is quite a different thing from the worry state. And I've certainly experienced the worry state a lot. Like when I was in the Air Force, and I was very ill-trained, and when I was doing my, you know, whatever work it was, investigation, I guess you'd call it, research, you know, I was never really properly trained. They gave me the job because they knew I was bright, and, you know, they forgot that I had a bad concussion at 14, and so I couldn't keep a secret to save my life. That would be, you know, and at the same time, didn't lie very well. So, you know, I was useless to intelligence, certainly counter-espionage. I gave the whole game away right away, you know? And I didn't particularly want to make a secret of it, because I really didn't believe in enemies, you know. I mean, you can't be in espionage of any sort unless you really believe in enemies, and I don't believe in enemies, you know. I think that even some of the more, you know, radical intelligence agencies in the world don't give a monkey's chunky for dear old John and his, you know, and his efforts to change the world, and that's the way I like it. But that doesn't mean to say that you know, that there's no way for the you know, the peaceful people powered practical potential for positive possibilities does not exist. Absolutely, it does exist. It's a very powerful force for goodness. We are a powerful force for goodness. We Neptunian folk, there must be hundreds of us out there by now. I was certainly, well, I think I've been connected now since about 14, I think. And yeah, I've had encounters of a very lucid kind, let's call them, because I don't think anyone can experience what we experience as individuals. That is certainly one of the natures of it. We can have similar experiences, of course, and there are many, many, many experiences which I've had, which other people have had. Clearly their experience has been much like mine, and we always seem to come out of it smelling of roses. Thank the Lord. However, I was going to light up and maybe wax a little philosophical, because I must make it clear I'm not a politician. I'm not even a Canadian. You know, I've been here 50 years. I'm still an Englishman, and proud of it. I think the Angles were a little bit up on the Saxons, and the Gaels were a little bit up on everybody, and I kind of like to identify as a Gael, of course, you know, typically. Well, we're the hemp people, you know, people of the hemp, according to the High Priest of Pot. And thank the great Creator who, in our time of need, gave us our salvation this time as a tiny seed. I like that. I wrote that in a little book, a little booklet I did some time ago. It's called, I gotta get this organized here, Rhymes for Reason. Rhymes for Reason, there we go. Rhymes for Reason. It's still out there. I still put one out once in a while. I've been putting them out since 1997. And I highly recommend it as a way of doing pamphlets. So if you're into pamphlets, this is a good way to do it. And all you need is a foolscap paper. Then you fold it. Like that. You end up with it like that. And you print on both sides of it. And I call it micro press. I hope Microsoft doesn't buy it. They probably have that title already. Anyway. For this one here, this is how it all started for me. Not quite, but close to it. In the federal election, or now I usually put in the next election. In the next election, voters will be asked to guess from a bunch of scoundrels who will screw them less, who will make almighty promises, bits of paper they won't keep, and talk a lot of nonsense. It's enough to make you weep. Now, sanity demands of us who've any minds at all that changes in the way it's done can stop a mighty fall, can help our planet back to health. Well-being can we enjoy if only we wake up to see. It's very simple ploy. Vote. None of the above. Okay. If health and happiness is the goal, and that for one and all, equal and different we must be, is that an order tall? Photosensate are we, in life's goodness are we bound. Photon conscience in surface chemistry, one is one and all around. Matter, molecule, or mind, call it what you will, you have a part in shaping it, creators, sons, and daughters still. Still the troubles of the heart, let the tears flow, empty out the darkest cave, let confusions go. Clean tabula rasa of the soul, clear laser search the mind, a better way of doing things we inevitably find. In politics, for instance, better management we seek, and justice, fair play, honesty, give liberty a tweak. To change our ways is evident, common reason we should share, and ground for understandings that scrutiny will bear. Gloom has come upon our times, blue meanness stalks the land, the commons licked with party tricks, and money they don't understand. My colour, my nation, my name, or my creed have little to do with what people need. Perhaps that's simply some very good seed. Some water, some sunshine, some land that's secure, some thatch for the roof, some fuel for the fire, some trust that fair future our children will share in a world for which we truly take care. What gets in our way then is simply black muck that we bleed from our mother and carry by truck. Our oil, our air. We pollute in unqualified burps, then worry and wonder why everything hurts. It's time to end the bully's rule, the plunder and the ravage. It's time to stand for what is kind, not what is cruel and savage. Away with all the dross and gold, away with parties too, away with ones who say they'll run and do good things for you. They run all right with bags packed tight, with pretty words and sighs, but when it comes to doing thing, all we get are lies. In the next election, ask them, if you will, give us the chance to run things, a better deal for all. But how can we arrange things? Well, simple when you think. Think in terms of everyone. Everyone can think. Each vote is cast for this or that in referendum round. We all find out what's up is up and whether down is down. Honesty, justice, fairness and truth are not heavy loads to bear when we can trust what loves us and is with us everywhere. Now, when we vote, none of the above, we simply say what's true. No longer do we really trust the keepers of this comic zoo. We've woken up to take our place among the spaceship's crew. mothership, father-son, holistic surface chemistry, goodness, the life force that always leads to liberty. Liberty from worry, from desire, set free. One with love and gratitude. Are we having fun yet? Imagine if you can. A lottery that tells us the woman and the man who will represent us as well as they can. They may not be the smartest, the brightest, or the best, but you can bet your boots, like you, they will be blessed with common sense and fairness. No old debts to pay. Can you glimpse tomorrow a better day? It's time for a caretaker government. In the next few months, Canadian voters will be asked to evaluate and endorse party-selected federal candidates for another general election. Unless we, the unaligned voters, act now, we will, as in the past, transfer our democratic voting privileges to these party-chosen men and women who, by tradition, transfer that power to their party leaders, the cabinet, over whom we the people have no further control. These media image leaders, many of dubious capacities, have little or no use for the power of support which we the electorate have pledged and allowed to be transferred to them. They bow out from the visionary responsibility of leadership. They hand our current interests and the future of our children to an establishment of a social, corporate, economic power elite who, from the back rooms of their selfish, culturally entrenched positions, dictate how we, the general population, should live our lives. Big money runs big business, which runs big government and frequently big labour as well. Propaganda of these state institutions encourage the people to remain divided in senseless interpersonal competition for the shabby symbols of material success. We have been victims of this worldwide system of power brokerage for too long. Break the pattern. Vote none of the above. Nota: for a caretaker government of randomly selected representatives for a non-adversarial constituent assembly. I wrote that back in 1969 and I worked then. This is the next bit about the same thing. The no-to-voter option. A practical way to implement the none of the above voter option for the next election will require concerned citizens to mount a massive letter-writing campaign to the Governor-General requiring him to instruct the senior Chief Electoral Officer to provide the no-to option on the ballot. To those constituencies where the tally of no-to voter exceeds the total cast for party and independent candidates, the People's Democratic Rights can be said to be the winner, in which case a lottery is held from the electors in the riding to provide a man and a woman as representatives to provide good management of collective affairs, which all government without party hoopla should be and is. Through regular official polls to establish priorities and referenda on tax spending and legislative matters with a responsive civil service, it should be possible to establish a caretaker government for collective well-being. Enough of candidates with hidden agendas who promise a fresh start and perform as franchise power grabbers. Network with your friends and make the no-to-voter option public. Write to the Governor-General to become a no-to-voter. Assert your political right and uphold the egalitarian nature of the Canadian society. Vote none of the above. Published in 1997 as a public service by the Caretaker Movement of Canada. Hornby Island, British Columbia, Canada, towards individual and collective enlightenment. That was me back in 1997, so nothing's really changed. Anyway, so, and then of course I wrote a little bit more, which was a bit more aggressive, because, you know, nobody wants to take anybody seriously unless you have a gun in your hand, I suppose, and all power to the peaceful, I believe, and being a peaceful man, and having put down the gun, which of course Chairman Mao didn't really have the option to do, but here in Canada, I do believe that we can transcend the blue meanness and dirty tricks of both the provincial and the federal government by bringing on an evolutionary movement which simply says, hey, I'm sorry, thus far no further. We will have a caretaker government. The caretaker government will be randomly selected at the next election that is called by the Chief Electoral Officer, and if the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor General choose not to endorse this as a legitimate public movement, to see an end of rule by parties and rule by hidden agendas, then clearly it will be supported by the Supreme Court of British Columbia and the Supreme Court of Canada as a legitimate, peaceful confrontation of a style of management which is not proved to be in the best interests of the Canadian people. And that the Canadian people, having recognized this and seen the way forward, being presented as a framework on which the best ideas in Canada can be hung, and that would provide a way of moving us forward into a new age. And as I said before, I had a vision which at the time I was quite convinced was a lucid dream. Happened in the middle of the day and happened after I'd been in a very stressed condition for a long time, and then it was like I was shown the future, and the future was very, very, very complex, and I knew that I would live through it, but I saw it as a series of very lucid incidents where sometimes I was actually the one on stage and seeing myself, and sometimes I was in the eyes of the of observing the performance, and these were flashes, incidental views, and out of which everything I've ever experienced grew, and I saw it as like an epiphany, because it confirmed in me an absolute realization that we are in the hands of the Creator. We are products of the Creator, and if the Creator wants somebody like me to come along, or like you to come along, by Jolly Jingo, you will, and I will. And my purpose is individual and collective enlightenment, and that starts with me. And all the years I've been here, I've tried to stay as under the radar as I possibly could. I'm standing out there and saying, hey, hold on there, there's people like me out here, there's lots of us, you know, and woo, time for change, Mr. Obama, can you hear me? This ear, big ear, can you hear? Listen, the world is coming out beautifully, but we have to make some changes before it all goes more crazy. See, that's what the doomsayers do. And I don't know it's going to get more crazy. I believe, right? Now, I want to discuss belief. Belief is just what you prefer. If you believe me, it's because you prefer what I say over what somebody else has said. And it makes sense to you and fits into what you think you know, and so on. And how that body of collective consciousness arises is just because periodically somebody, you know, is able to get up there and say what a lot of people want to hear said. And I think we have to be very clear. You know, we don't need any more adversarial political parties, you know, behaving like idiots in public places. We need to have men and women's circles. We need to acknowledge the great and profound value of the patience of the Aboriginal people in this country, and say, hey, we want to make a fresh start as settling people. We want to acknowledge yes, 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 and yes to everything you're telling us about the land now, and have been telling us about everything here since we came, whatever, 250 years ago. And some of us were listening, and some of us weren't listening. And the ones who weren't listening were the ones who were counting how much money they got and what they could do with it and how they could, trick people into accepting this way of, busyness. Philosopher. And a philosopher just means somebody who loves wisdom. So if you love wisdom, then you're a philosopher too. And as was pointed out to me some time ago, years ago actually, there was a philosopher living in Vancouver. I don't know what happened to him, but he seemed like a very stout young man. And, he really knew his stuff. I mean, he was a serious guy. Now, I don't know if he went away into the academics, got lost in the, or what happened to him, but he did inspire in me, that it wasn't so strange to want to be a philosopher. A philosopher loves wisdom, and wisdom is one of the best survival adjuncts, I guess, to the human biocomputer that you can have. It's like, what is wise? Well, then people say, well, it's okay for you to say that, John, but you've been out there as an activist, risking life and limb in the trenches for all these years, and how is that wise? It's like I don't believe in camouflage. I don't think you can fool anybody. Well, the British did, of course, and I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't really give too much value to that are commonly believed to be like That's why I was no good in intelligence, is because I'll tell you anything you want to know, as long as I won't give you names, right? And I can't give you addresses, and often I can't give you names because I just don't keep that kind of record of stuff in my brain. But I got taken in once by the CIA when I went to Ottawa. Right? And in the basement of the Confederation building, no less, they had a listening post, and there was a man called no less than Mr. Birch who was running the place at the time. And I went in to see my MLA. I'm trying to think of his name now. Manley. Was it John Manley, I think? Anyway, he's from Souk, and I was living in that area at the time, and I was out on the hemp issue and a few other things. But certainly the fiscal issue and the hemp issue, and they've all gone hand in hand with me and honourable government. A few of those crazy legitimate ideas that statesmen are supposed to have. I believe that there is a role for statesmen, people, and stateswomen, if it comes to that, people who are interested in the quality of the state. But what state are we talking about? The state of the community, for instance, is statesman work. The state of the world is statesman work, and therefore each and every one of us has to become statesmen. So we have to consider our own state. And how is our state? Are we at peace? Do we want to go to war with any? Have we created an enemy out there somewhere that we feel or fear, whether he, she, or what it exists? How much negativity do we bother to bring into our lives? Just by thinking about it, and you can be just a quivering mass of jelly buttons, Whereas, in fact, if you know what made you loves you, and loves this little girl on the wall behind me here, it's there's nothing to fear. Except fear itself. But, well, who said that? Roosevelt, didn't he? And of course, he was on to it. He knew. All these people know. It's just that they keep it to themselves and they don't let it slip. Because if they did, then, hey, people would be enjoying life as much as they are entitled to. And that's more than the commons are entitled. The commons don't really want much. That's the fear of the aristocracy. The commons really don't need an awful lot to be happy. The aristocracy need a great deal to be happy, and they're afraid they're going to lose it. Well, no. They're not going to. Somebody's got to take care of it. Hey, we need caretakers. If it takes a lord and 14, henchmen to maintain an empire, a tiny empire, Well, it does. You know, now, if they're oppressors and, you know, don't carry their own load, and they, sort of a non-government organization that doesn't do anything, or, you know, goes hunting for charity, you know, from the natives and saying, oh yeah, well, we're all starving in the city, and you know you don't want us to come out and raid you, so give it to us now. Kind of feudalism, because that's really what it is. And, you know, that's based on the few do all principle. So we have an elite, you know, we have you know, these different classes of people, from, you know, totally destitute to totally, in many cases, self-destructive people who have made a series of very bad choices, which were not merely, what can we say, faultless, but we're, you know, consciously evil, and there's a high price to pay for doing wrong, and we shouldn't forget that. Now, I suppose there are some people who say, well, not everybody believes in karma. Not everybody believes that what goes around comes around. Well, let's just say I'm watched long enough or stood back far enough to see what goes down. But my observation is, in Canada, it happens at an alarmingly fast rate. You know, Canadians are very long-suffering people, but they're not fools. And there's a day when, you know, sort of like en masse, they wake up and say, enough is enough is enough of this bullshit, you know. Whether they say that to me, or they say it to Campbell, or they say it to whatever this other clown is, that no disrespect, John, no disrespect, you know. I shouldn't express disrespect, you know. Respect, you know, right? God, you know, we're all products of creation, you know. And it's not fair to be rude about people. They do the best they can with what they've got, you know. Sometimes what they've got isn't much, and therefore they struggle, and therefore they push harder, and therefore they end up doing a lot of damage. And that's one of the reasons I guess I've been kept out of media for all these years, because they are afraid that my reasoning is sound, and that my purpose is sound, and that my intention is sound, and that I'm not doing this to become well known or famous. I'm doing this because I think this is one way to pass on information. I think it's one way that people can realize that, you know, I am on the level. The falsest thing about me are my teeth, and I'd be ready to take those out. But you wouldn't like it. However, better to have a beard than be a bald-faced liar. I think that's the answer to that. And love thy neighbor as thyself. It's pretty good. I like that. And I love, they drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took them in. And many other old saws like that I could go on about for hours. But I probably talked about 20 minutes already, so it probably needs chopping up. Anyway, brothers and sisters, this is a Fluid Druid signing off. And I didn't get very far into this Blessed Sacrament. So I might just add a little music to this. That little humoresque I like. I like that. Da, 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 da. It's a nice little song. I like that one. It's very Englishy, you know. I'm kind of Englishy. I'm, I have lived in the thatched cottage. Very nice thatched cottage, I must say. The Admiral was good to his driver. You know, the money has had its day. You know, money is not going to do it anymore. Real wealth is what's going to do it now. And real wealth can only be generated by agricultural means. Because clearly, instead of playing these war games to, you know, cut down on the population, make money, of course. That's the primary reason for war games. All the fraudulent, we're going to come and help you kind of stuff is just a bunch of crock. It's like, let us police you, Honduras. Oh yeah, great. Let us come and help you to have a better police force. Haiti. Oh, lovely. Very nice. No, it's it's just deceit, deception, dirty tricks, blue meanness, and time for change. And I've known that for most of my life. And I guess most of my life I've been saying, well, how can we do that in a way which is harmonious? How can we affect a rational intelligence, metanoia, if you want to call it that, or shift in dynamic comprehensions so that humanity can triumph over its previous blunders, and it's possible to arrive at those ideas. Many, many people have done it. I'm not alone. I'm just one voice in the wilderness, and my name is John, and I am a voice crying in the wilderness. But now I guess, the wilderness can come to me or something. I don't know, but what I do know is that we will come out of this in a happy state. We will come out of this as a world of peace. We will come out of this where children, all life form, dance and sing in jubilation and celebration of creation. We need a jubilee year. We need an end to the suffering caused by what Christ did when he overturned the money changers' tables. We have to understand that this has been a profound locus for evil. Yes, it's a tool. Yes, it's a valuable tool. But we have to get beyond the limitations that have been engendered by blue meanness and dirty tricksterism. These go back to family greed. Where if I'm a rich man and I know that my family expect me to continue to, bring them what they need, then I have to go out and do it somehow. I have to use whatever connections I have and keep that money rolling in. If I know a banker that can just write me more and more credit, or if I am a banker that could write myself more and more credit, or my family more and more credit, and they become profligate with conspicuous consumption, as Theodore Veblen so nicely put it, then, it's going to get tight. And the more it gets tight, the more bizarre it gets. People begin to rob one another. People begin to cheat on one another. People begin to break contracts with one another. And at the bottom, of course, just a little bit above the destitute people are those people struggling to be in the game. To be able to pay their bills, to be able to travel to work. And of course, they are the people who are dedicated to the working ethic, the work ethic. We're all God's children, but we all owe something to the larger community. And from cradle to grave, we're shackled to an understanding that most of us don't understand at all very well. And, and if you make any kind of study of it, you realize, it is a myth, it is a lie, it is a dirty trick, it is blue meanness. And if you have a social security number in Canada, that should be enough. If you have a car with your social security number in it, and from the numbers on it, you've chosen whatever it is you think, it's going to be your PIN number, you're okay. You're a free soul in Canada with the complete support of the people of Canada, represented in the ideal state by the government of Canada, just represented. But the people of Canada remain the government of Canada, not the Queen, not the aristocracy of Britain, not even a party, but the people at large. A friend of mine, Don Briere, a very fine man, Don Briere, some people call him, an intensely dedicated hemp activist, a man who has stood very plainly to see the end of the prohibition and has spend a lot of time in court and a lot of time in prison, along with numbers of other people in that pursuit. And I recognize that he attempted to form a party called We the People. And it may even have been formed, I don't know. I oppose the idea in principle, not that I don't doubt that it would be possible to accumulate good representatives, but there's still that circle that drew me out thing that gets in the way of what I would call the egalitarian nature of the human community. And that's why I believe that the random selection from those people who have self-selected by voting none of the above on the ballot, the simple solution that I present, have for 15 years, and who made that choice in the last provincial election. And I'm not even sure they didn't make the choice in the federal election, because I understand that the Tories only got 22% of the registered voters in the federal election. So I don't really know. It's about the same as they have in British Columbia. Again, I'm not being a politician. I'm saying philosophically, we have to acknowledge that the necessity for a structural change has come, and that there are really very few alternatives that are as studied and as engineered as what I've been proposing. Other people have studied it and had goes at it as well, and it's even been practiced a few times in different places, but never with the corollary that I've been trying to encourage, and that is that if none of the above wins the election, then there should be a random selection from that body of people